Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. Today I'm joined once again by Irralee Adruzjovska. She is a physiotherapist from Sydney, Australia, living in the UK. We talked when she was first on about her recovery from Raynaud's, but today we're going to talk about the Wim Hof method of cold water immersion, and she's going to take us through what that's all about, what it leads to, and what the benefits are. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and we'll get back to you personally. And finally, you can reserve your place in one of my seminars or purchase any of my mind-body guides, also known as the PDFs, at www.crushingdoubt.org. Hi, Irralee. Thank you for joining me again. Very, very pleased to have you back.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for inviting me back.
So one of the reasons you and I wanted to talk again was because we didn't get into Wim Hof enough. I mean, we talked some about him and his method, but you wanted to tell me more about it and I wanted to know more about it, so it was a perfect match. Tell me, when was it that you discovered him in your process of getting better from Raynaud's?
The way that happened was in getting better from Raynaud's and obviously sharing that with Georgie from Surfer. She came across a cold water challenge that was advertised on Facebook or something like that. And she thought, who would be up for this crazy challenge? Oh, funnily enough, my name popped up and she asked if I would join her in this cold water challenge. And I thought, yeah, that would be great. That would be a progression to me exposing myself to the cold, because with Raynaud's or in the cold in general, our body reacts more strongly to cold water than to cold air. It's a much more impactful, the cold, when it's in water than in air. So I knew if I could overcome my innate fear of water because of Raynaud's, that would be my next step in my evolution in resolving that. So it seemed like a natural thing. And that happened a few months ago. So we started on this challenge run by a couple of guys in the UK. And through that, I could tell that they'd taken a lot of their methods from the Wim Hof understanding. So, and they kind of presented a sort of user-friendly style, if you like, for the uninitiated, if you like. But I wanted to go deeper and find out on the basis of what they did that work. So I looked up Wim Hof then, and he's got lots of information on the internet, on YouTube, lots of free resources. But I actually signed up to one of his courses to experience, not to learn his method, but to experience his method on Commune. And I did learned the breathing techniques, the mindset techniques, and the cold water exposure that he demonstrates.
So this was directly with him.
Well, a recording of him. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Recording of him. All right. I mean, that's part of what I wanted to ask is, I hear so much about him, and I was thinking, I don't know, do people actually go to a retreat with him, or what's the...
Yeah, well, you can go to a retreat with him, but he runs lots of courses which are accessible, that you can access his recorded courses and work through the system with him. And that's what I did. And that was really interesting to me through the mind-body lens, to consider what he is doing, which is influencing the autonomic nervous system with conscious control.
Okay, so that's part of what I wanted you to take me through is what is this actually doing? Because, I mean, there's many reasons I wanted to ask you this, but my family goes on vacation on the Atlantic Ocean in Long Island in New York. And whenever I have to get into the ocean, I've trained myself to know I'm not going to want to do it. And then I do it, and I love it every time.
Yeah.
And I come out feeling better. I come out feeling like insulated from the world and just great.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. So maybe you can help explain that, because I think there's something very similar.
Yes. And this is what the Wim Hof method's all about. It's not just being able to conquer the cold. The cold is just an example of a stressor that you have an automatic reaction to physiologically, and you learn to be able to control that physiological response to that particular stressor, and then you can apply it to other stressors in your life. So in the case, the reason you feel so good when you come out of the sea, well, there's lots of physiological reasons for that. Release of they've done studies on Wim Hof when he's been in the cold, and other volunteers that have learned his method. And they found things like it stimulates the periaqueductal gray bit of the brainstem, which is where endogenous opioids are produced. So you get that euphoric kind of feel good can be activated when that system is tapped into. But in you going in the sea is an example of when that's a fear, and despite the fear, you go into it with a mindset of, well, let's give it a go anyway, even though I'm feeling a bit nervous about it. And then you overcome that fear, and it surprises you because you love it so much, and you come out, and then it leaves you with that sense of power and accomplishment over that perceived fear that you started with.
Okay, so I definitely understand the euphoria of conquering a fear. That I've experienced many times. But I wonder, what is it about the cold? Because I think about it, if I got into like a really hot hot tub, I don't come out euphoric from that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, if we were scared about getting into water that was boiling, we would get into it and actually burn ourselves and not be okay. So there's something going on here, and I'm very curious what it is. I don't even know if you can shed light on that. Maybe to you it's every bit as much a mystery as it is to me, but I'm curious what do we make of that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, when we get into a hot bath, that's inducing a relaxation effect, which is not excitatory, if you like. Like cold is a shock. What you experience when you go into cold is a shock, and it's a stress effect. And so that's a different physiology to getting into a comfortable warm bath. That's not creating a stress effect. That's creating the opposite of a stress effect.
Yep, I don't know if this is right, and if this fits with your understanding of it. I mean, it seems like with hot temperatures, your choices are relaxation or being burnt. There's no in between land where you can just have the shock and the overcome.
No, that's right. But that's because obviously the burn that is danger, that is appropriate,
actual
response.
Danger.
Right. Yeah, actual danger. When we go into cold water for a reasonable amount of time, it's not too long, that's not actual danger, but we still get that shock stress response if we've been conditioned to fear it or avoid it, or that type of thing.
Now, do you know how he discovered his method?
It's an interesting story. It's a sad story. In that 1995, his wife committed suicide.
I did know that. Yep.
Yeah, and he was left with 4 children, and he was really devastated. And he describes how he went into a spin, of course. And somewhere along the line, he realized that one day he jumped into some cold water, and it was the first time he just felt peace. Everything stopped.
Wow.
It was like instantaneous mindfulness. and he realized that was really powerful, and that was the first time he'd felt like that since that had happened in his life. And then he thought, I need more of this. And that's kind of where it originated, him just discovering the effect on himself and in quietening his mind, and how good that felt. And so he developed it further from there.
So I wanted to make an observation based on what you just said. And I it's funny, I had heard that, and then I think I forgot it because it was too disturbing. Which is the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that another aspect of what he must have gotten out of that was that he got out of a certain type of headspace. He must have been going over and over and over the kind of cerebral cortex kind of processing of what had happened. And there are so many times when we're kind of sick of it. Even as a therapist, there are times when I go to see my therapist, I think, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with me. It's like I'm done with that type of thinking. And I think I would rather jump in a bucket of ice, not because it's so bad, but because
No.
we want something different that frees us from that. And one of the reasons I'm asking this is that in my work with mind-body work, I find something similar is happening, not through shock, but there's something similar happening where we get people to concentrate on something that's very present and away from the way that they normally think about things. And I wanted to ask you, is that part of what you experience in the work that you do, or in the way that you think about it?
Yeah, that's right. I think in the sense of getting in the water, that shocked him out of his habitual pattern of being in his head. And in therapy, we're trying to change people's habitual sort of churning that's going over and diverting them somewhere else. And cold water is just one of many different mechanisms, I guess, to do that. Creates a situation where when you're in cold water, when you're having cold showers, you're not thinking about your worries or anything else. You are fully present in the experience of the cold. You are fully mindful in that moment, and nothing else is going on for you. And in that time gives you a rest from what he calls the beehive of the mind, which I think is a nice description of it. So you haven't got that beehive going on. You've got the cold going on, and that has got your full attention, and everything else just isn't there in that moment.
And that sounds like that rings pretty true to what you have experienced yourself, that when you do it.
Yes.
Can you describe it a little bit? Actually, Irralee, describe the first time, if you remember it.
Yeah, okay. So what is important to understand, they've done studies on him, and they've just exposed him to water, or they've just done the mindset and then cold water, or he's just done the breathing, cold water. And it's basically, you have to do all the things together to get the effect. Now, before we go into cold water, you do a breathing technique. And it's not a relaxation breathing technique. It's based on a Tibetan fire breathing. So it's lots of big, full breaths, lots of them, about 30 of them. And then you breathe out and you hold your breath for a minute. And then you inhale fully and hold it for 10, 15 seconds. And then you do it again, the fire breathing. And each time you hold the breath for the next time 1.5 minutes, and then 2 minutes, and then 2.5 minutes. And so you're building up your ability to hold the breath for longer. Now, partly that you can do that because you're blowing off carbon dioxide, but in doing this, it creates a little bit of a stress response in your body already. So your body's already primed to stress before you hit the cold stress. So that's number one thing. Then you go in with the mindset. So you go in with the mindset of setting the intention. I'm going to have 30 seconds of cold water, and you set your mind to that. And you go in with the mindset that you are not going to resist the cold. So this is where I think it really makes sense in the mind-body work as well. Facing the stressor without resistance, just accepting it, allowing it to be there. And ultimately, you get to the point where you actually look forward to and enjoy being exposed to it. So inevitably, what happened the first time, the way he says to do it gently is to start with a hot shower and then turn it to cold. And it's depending how aversive people are to cold, you can just have it for 5 seconds on the last 5 seconds, if that's all you want to start with. And I started about 30 seconds. And yes, the first time I went in, there was some screaming that went on. Clearly, I hadn't mastered it on the first time. And of course, you shouldn't, of course, you can't master any of these things on the first time, can you? And that's all okay.
Yep.
So that was quite amusing. And then you do it on a daily basis. So you build up your tolerance, and each time you expose yourself a little bit longer. And you've gone in, you've done the breathing, you've set your mind, you're going to go into the cold. And also, what happens when you go into cold water? This shock response is you start gasping for breath, you start hyperventilating, you tense up your muscles, and then you're mentally thinking, I hate this. So obviously all those things make the experience far worse. So instead you go in and you have the cold come on, and you slow your breath down. You slow your out breath down so that you are calm, having a calm response to the stressor rather than perpetuating it with a rapid breath. And you don't resist, you kind of relax into it. You just let it happen and you reframe it as this sort of refreshing experience as opposed to something really horrible, which you're going to, resist. And it's kind of like when exposing someone to a painful trigger or something else like that. You set the mindset, you encourage them to let go the resistance and allow it to, whatever happened to sort of happen a little bit without fighting against that sensation. And so each time, I only screamed the first time, I'm proud to say, and there were no more screams. And by a couple of weeks, I was managing to be in 2 minutes in a cold shower and being able to regulate my breath, and almost got to the point of enjoying it after 2 weeks. It takes about 2 weeks to build it up to about a 2-minute exposure. The next step.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, tell me the next step.
So the next step is, okay, let's get into an icy cold bath or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, getting into a cold body of water can be easier than the shower. The shower sort of blasts on you in a bit more kind of direct, whereas the water, if you lay still in it, there's a little pocket of warm water that develops around you if you lay still until you waft, so you can kind of stay a little bit longer.
That's funny.
And then you can stay, and whilst you're there, whilst you're in there, you're doing the relaxed breath. So that's different to the fire breathing before. You're just doing a relaxed breath. And in my mind, I was just trying to reframe this cold sensation as it's just a cold sensation. And I can feel it's cold, but that's okay. It's just a sensation. And that's kind of how you can then not react to it with the stress response, which makes it all more unpleasant, of course.
It's so interesting how much overlap there is between this and other methods that really work to get people feeling better. Because even if we're talking about just talk therapy, we do try to move people towards, this is just a sensation.
Yes.
I don't need to freak out about this. I don't need to scream.
You're allowed to scream the first time.
You are. In fact, there's primal scream therapy, and then you're supposed to. But, this really is helping me understand certain things as I think it through. As an example, as I mentioned, it really is helping me think through what happens when I get in the ocean. Because my breathing actually, I think, does slow down when I'm in the ocean. And I think that's some of what feels good. And breath, to me, seems really important. When I was suffering from my 8 years of back pain, it was always at its worst. Well, let me put it this way. When it was at its worst, one of the things I noticed is that my breathing was very shallow. I was like barely breathing. Yeah. I was just like, and that's a little hard to describe to people because I was breathing normally in actuality.
Yeah. But you were frozen. Yeah.
But I was frozen. Yeah. And it was just these it was like I was breathing more breaths, but they were so shallow that I was probably taking in the same amount of oxygen, but it was like not in the right way. And I work with the first person who ever came on my podcast is someone I cured of their back pain, and Vitaly Martineau. And I don't know if you've gotten to see his video on my podcast, but he does what's called breath work. And I don't know if you've done breath work separate from Wim Hof, but it does seem like, as you were talking, I was like, this sounds very in line with what Vitaly does, because we're actually going to have some episodes come out where he does breath work. I interview the people with him, and then he takes them through a breathing exercise. And the breathing seems to bring on a stress response. And then afterwards, the people are like euphoric. They've had some kind of altered experience. So it's different than Wim Hof, but it has some overlap.
Right. Yeah, and it's different to how you train yourself to do this cold water thing. It's another thing again about him being able to do these incredible things like he went up Mount Everest to the death zone, like 7,500 meters, wearing nothing but shorts and shoes. He ran a full marathon in temperatures close to minus 20 degrees Celsius above the polar circle in Finland, just shirtless and, you know, in his shoes. He had an ice bath for an hour and 53 minutes, which is a Guinness Book of Records record, of course. But so what they've done, they've done a cool study on him. And the point that Wim would say is it's not him. He's not an unusual individual. He's trained other people to walk up Kilimanjaro in shorts and exposed to cold. And so it's a teachable skill. But of course, he's developed his over a longer time. So he's kind of, you know, really good at it. And what was really interesting about the breathing, which is what I was coming to, they put him in a PET scan, which looks at metabolic activity in your body. And he did his breathing technique, which I like I say, it's not his breathing technique. It's an ancient breathing technique, an energetic breathing technique. And what they noticed on the PET scan, when they exposed him to cold water, he was able to maintain his skin temperature at 34 degrees for 25 minutes when he was in a cold water suit. So he could consciously keep his skin temperature at 34 degrees. When they put him in the suit and exposed him to cold water and he didn't do the breathing and the meditation, his skin temperature dropped like everybody's would. Yeah. But when he did the breathing and he's in the cold water suit and they got the PET scan on him, they saw that there was this intense activity in his intercostal muscles around his ribs. And this was generating lots and lots of heat, which is where the lungs were. And so it's like it was warming up his body from this intercostal activity that had been fired up by the breathing he'd done in preparation. And that energy that was stored up and generated in his intercostal muscles was being released, and he was able to maintain his body temperature despite being in cold for 25 minutes.
So this also has a lot of overlap with what I do, because I think when I help people change their mindset, I do think that allows them to gain control over bodily experience. Same thing happens in biofeedback and in another way. So we're finding lots of different ways to be able to control the bodily experience. The question I had with Wim Hof and your experience with this is, what is required of the practice to be able to utilize that? And I'm going to put out another question just because I want to get it out there for while I'm thinking about it. Does the fact that he can alter his skin temperature, does it protect him from actual hypothermia? Because
yeah, so he maintains his core temperature, yeah, and his skin temperature. They're measuring both. But the first thing that changes in cold is your skin temperature goes down first, and eventually it's your core temperature. So yes, he was able to manipulate his autonomic nervous system so that it didn't react to cold in the normal way. He could maintain body temperature through conscious control, which was thought to never be possible, that people could consciously control their body temperature. And it's a combination. So they put monks in who do meditative practice into these cold water suits, and they couldn't maintain their temperature. So it's the mindset, it's the breath, it's everything combined. It's not one element or the other. But I think what I get from what he talks about is that he would say that the limit is not our bodies, it's our minds. And what sort of speaks to your work is that by overcoming through a process of cold water exposure and doing that, working through that program, which you can do with him, you gain that sense of power over your body. And that can then translate into other areas of your life as well.
Right. I mean, there's the phrase mind over matter, which is, it's as misunderstood as when people say pain is in your head. It's not. Yes. It's from your head and real in your body. And mind over matter, the way I think about it is, it's not that matter is a certain way and you pretend it isn't.
No.
It's that you use your mind to actually change matter in some
That's
way.
right. And the fact that you can use your mind to change your physiology. And I think also what he says, he points out that we've become so uncomfortable with discomfort. We've become so comfortable. When you think of mammals and even humans, it's only more in recent years that we've had central heating and air conditioning. And mammals, we are supposed to be able to regulate our body temperature. That's what makes a mammal and not a reptile. And if you think all other mammals, except the ones that we've domesticated and turned into the comfort of a human life, they can cope with all those temperature sensations, variations, and their body adapts so that they can tolerate that. We've lost the ability to regulate our bodies to changes in external temperature because we live in such comfort zones all the time. And as soon as we feel uncomfortable, we don't rely on an internal system to sort that out. We rely on an external fan or heater to control our internal temperature. And he's all about tapping into our own internal controls, which we have, but we've kind of forgotten how to use.
It's funny that you mentioned reptiles, though, because I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, wow, if he can alter his skin temperature, it's like a mammal being able to be a little reptilian. And of course, we have the reptilian mind.
Yeah.
The reptilian brain. Yeah.
But the problem is reptiles can't. Reptiles have to rely on going into the sun to warm up. They have to use the external.
They have to do the
thing.
opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas mammals have the ability to regulate our temperature. So we sweat, we shiver, we can actually bring our temperature into homeostasis. Whereas reptiles can't. They have to rely on getting themselves out in the sun or to warm up and use the environment to warm up. But we've evolved the ability to do that, but we've kind of lost it in modern life because we use fancy gadgets instead.
So what you're telling me is we need to develop some kind of treatment for iguanas where they can do some breathing. And then we need to do the reverse for reptiles. So tell me, Irralee, let's finish on this. Tell me a little bit about, is there a daily practice, a weekly practice? What's recommended, or what have you found to be most useful?
Yeah, I think it depends on what someone needs from it. So for some people, they need to have this cold water exposure in their shower every day because it really sets them up. It gets the feel-good factors released in their body and it helps them cope with the day. And they find it a really helpful daily mechanism to do. For me personally, I don't need that in my life currently, but what I've used it for is to get me to the point where now I can go wild swimming and enjoy it. So it's been for me a training process for me to completely overcome my cold water aversion and completely prove that my Raynaud's is definitely not here anymore. And it's allowed me now to get to where I wanted to get, which was to enjoy swimming in the cold water outdoors in Britain, through this summer. And now I've done this through the summer, so I haven't had a winter doing this yet. But I'm thinking I'm going to be doing this in the summer, and ultimately I want to be able to continue it through the winter as well. So for me, it's been to do the swimming, but for other people, there's definite health benefits that have been shown from the daily cold water exposure with, using this method in a way. It's no point, you won't get benefit from cold water exposure if you're in there screaming for 30 seconds. There's no benefit to that.
Right.
So it's being able to have the cold water exposure and regulate your breath and then get the benefit.
This is actually making me think about exposure therapy. There needs to be a balance. If you just expose, but it's a horrific experience, that's just re-traumatizing. That doesn't do anything.
No.
This is a method that allows you to sink into it in the right way with the right balance and get you to a calming place as opposed to freaking out. So I wanted to ask about your Raynaud's also. When is it totally gone? Like you never have that experience anymore, or is it you can control it? What's the?
I haven't had it yet. I get like the normal, when you go into cold, you get cold hands and feet, but that's not Raynaud's. But so I would have normally got it just in these conditions, when I go into cold water now, but I don't. But ultimately, if I can wild swim in winter in Britain and still not get it, well, then that's it. It's not here again. But I have not experienced it since I worked on it. And that's why I wanted to do the cold water exposure, to really still, prove to myself I still don't have it, and there's no reason why I will ever get it again now that I've, changed the imprint on my nervous system, which is what caused it in the first place.
And one thing I was thinking about is whatever the method is that allows you to feel safe and have efficacy and feel like you can do it, do all kinds of different things, it's breaking through to a new you. And I wanted to just ask, how do you feel about the new you after this happened? How has it changed you kind of more globally?
Yeah, well, more globally, I never whinge about the cold. I'm less bothered by the weather and the cold. I can tolerate, my capacity to tolerate cold weather is just much greater, and it also has opened up the opportunity for me to enjoy outdoor swimming. As an Australian, I love outdoor swimming, and I haven't been able to do that in this country because it's been too cold. And now I feel like I can reconnect to something I used to love to do, and I can do it in the current environment I'm living in Britain.
That's really interesting. It's like you've brought a piece of home from the outside into your internal experience. Well, Irralee, I'm so glad you came back on to talk about this, and I was really interested to hear more. So thank you for sharing, and we'll keep in touch. This is fantastic, and I feel like I should apologize for taking a hot shower before this interview. I'll work on the cold aspect, and maybe I don't need to just go to the ocean to get that. So cold showers are coming.
That's it, and enjoy.
All right, thank you, Irralee.
And no screaming.
No screaming.
Thanks, Dan.
No, I've got to get to a point where it's genuine no screaming.
Genuine no screaming. Yeah, not. All right.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Irralee.
Thank you.
This was fascinating to get to hear Irralee's experience with the Wim Hof method, and I think you can see that I was just kind of moving through different levels of curiosity about things. It really wasn't planned out. I just was curious. What about this? What about my swimming in the ocean? What about the breathwork stuff that I do with Vitaly? And I liked how it all flowed together. It helps us to see that as you master things in your mind and feel in a genuinely good place about things, everything changes from there. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we'll get back to you personally.